Assurance in Education. Over to you, Denise and Angus, when you're ready.
Amazing. Thank you for the introduction, Lindeni. So our topic we've already seen there. So I just like to introduce myself and Angus. I am Denise Wilson. I work in the Nexus team as an academic quality enhancement advisor. And then Angus is our digitalization lead in our academics space. So joined us very recently and very enthusiastic to have him support in this project. So huge shout out to Angus, and maybe just because we do have a few extra minutes, it is very heartwarming to see some previous Eduvos employees and current Eduvos employees and other friends who have joined us in the participants list. So just a warm welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining the session. So you'll see on the left of the slide, there is a slido.com link. You're welcome to join. You can go onto your browser, either on your computer or your phone, and then you can use the hashtag 198327, or you can scan the QR code if you prefer to join us for a few Slido interactive questions that will go live throughout the presentation. So I won't speak to the Slido throughout the presentation, but there will be prompts on the slide that will guide you where that specific aspect goes live. So maybe just to dive then again into the topic, we're going to be focusing on a specific experience that we've had in our institution over the last 3 years in terms of quality assurance for MARC publication processes. And this is with key stakeholders in our academic administration teams, as well as our learning design teams. So for our contextual introduction, we can give an overview just of the complexity that higher education institutions face when it comes to processes in academic operations. So the process that we will be focusing on for the purpose of this presentation is the process of setting up and publishing marks for students, and the points and touch points there that make this a very complicated process to manage. So in bullet point 2, you can see learning management systems have potentially the gradebook that can be integrated with student information management systems, also known as SIM or student portal. But the complexity of getting marks to an LMS system and into SIM, we won't be focusing on for the purpose of our presentation. We'll be talking about how we get that gradebook item to be a true reflection of the student's performance. And in there, we've got the process of gradebook being set up by content writers, learning technologists, how gradebook then integrates with our student information management system, with systems engineers and LMS support teams, and then quality assurance by our academic administrating teams, learning technologists, and signing off of final marks as accurate after assessment boards have deliberated over findings. And this is usually done, as I said, with academic management teams and national assessment managers before we can trust our marks as accurate and publish those through the support of academic admin managers and our systems engineers. So you can appreciate that this process of quality assurance of marks is a complex one. And if at any point throughout this process something fails, that it can negatively impact on student experience. So examples of how that could impact could be through delayed or staggered mark publication, or inaccurate marks being released to students, which then has the risk of a student unrighteously being expected to rewrite or repeat a module. So we can also see the risk from an institutional point of view if this process does fail. So maybe just to pull this into an analogy for us, you can imagine that this final published mark that we are releasing to a student has to be a quality assured mark. And if we make the analogy of it being a gourmet cooked meal that we're putting in front of the student, and we want to have tested this meal with some taste testers before it gets put in front of the student, because we know the risk is, if it were the king tasting this food, that they could die. But in our students being the impact that it has on their progression is significant. So we'll go back to that shopping analogy and then cooking the recipe analogy within this process. But for now, quality assurance is collectively housed under shopping and the recipe that we're cooking to get that final quality assured mark out. So to move on then to how this looks within Eduvos, on our next slide, you can see our problem statement. So we have a lot of manual configuration of gradebooks that need to be performed, and then quality assurance of the marks that push through from gradebook into our student information management system. So this process, being manual, can be time consuming and prone to human error. And if it's not streamlined and automated, it can delay error identification, delay mark publication, affect data accuracy, and obviously place a very large administrative burden on all of the stakeholders involved in the process. Just waiting for the next slide to come up. Thank you so much. All right, so we have then, just to walk through the process very quickly from each of us aside, our assessment structures are defined by our content writers in collaboration with our faculty members in the form of a module guide. So this data gets pulled in or loaded into our student information management system by our National Academic Admin lead. From there, the entries for those specific structures that form part of the assessment are extracted off of our SIM system now as of 2024 moving forward by a learning design tracker that gives the specification sheet for our teams that need to do the setup of our grade items on our individual assessment pages. So that's where our learning technologists come in, where they go into the individual modules, like the example here, bioentrepreneurship assessments, go to grades, gradebook, and then work on the individual grade items, setting up a calculation that is saved. And this calculation then attributes the weighting as is specified in our specification sheet from our assessment structure data. We then do quality assurance on the final mark after marking by the lecturer, and that mark is then pushed into our student information management system by our academic administrators. So they'll be able to pick up where there was a non-attempt by a student, for example. In terms of mark publication then, after Academic Assessment Board sits and approves of these marks, the marks are pushed through from the Student Info Management System portal when they're locked onto the mark publication or My Results portal for our individual students. Thanks, Angus. Next slide. All right, so just from block 3 this year, 2025, we did a count of how many grade items were found to have now had an error appear in them because of changes on our assessment pages throughout the block, understanding that there are lots of cooks in the kitchen, coming back to that analogy that we had in the beginning. In total, we had 1,229 grade items that were manually loaded onto our LD tracker, not manually, with the specification sheets to have been identified as having an error associated with them. So you can imagine if we had to now manually go and screen through all of those, it would be playing a game of whack-a-mole to fix the problem very reactively instead of proactively. So with those grade items identified, a total of 314 modules were identified to have these problematic grade items. So you can appreciate then our research aim states the study investigated whether automating data collection, as we did in 2025, from our learning management system Moodle, could enhance quality assurance, efficacy, and accuracy of mark publication, and also decrease time on task for our stakeholders. We assess the efficacy of automated methods to ensure conformance to specification sheets for gradebook setup, comparing more manual approaches in 2023 and quarter 1 and 2 in 2024 to automated data collection methods in quarter 3 and 4 of 2024 and in 2025. So just a very quick timeline overview there on the right. 2023, we initiated our gradebook project the first time, and we had not fully expanded to all of the types of assessments. And in 2024, we started using templated grade items to give more guidance to our stakeholders. We expanded to more types of assessments to be included from a gradebook setup point of view for our learning design team. And we enhanced visibility of assessment structures, the what to build, by pulling out those specification reports from our student information management system, originally from our module guides. And then we also experienced some growth and scaling difficulties in 2024. And 2025, this year, from May onwards, we started using the automated methods of web scraping and data mining, that specifically being what to fix.
Thanks so much, Denise. Good afternoon, everybody. So I think to just give a quick overview of sort of the methods we used when conducting our studies, we did a mixed methods approach, looking at the QA records that were logged by the academic administrative team from 2023 and 2025, just to compare the error rates amongst these years and trying to see how that actually aligns with the different interventions that we have put into place. And then also just conducted a survey with the academic administrative team, as well as the learning design and learning technologies team, just to get their subjective experiences of this. But with the specific intervention we're discussing today, what we really tried to do was to use the gradebook data and incorporate that into our feedback, using that as a loop for us to then look at how do we actually improve our quality assurance processes and ultimately improve the accuracy of the mock publication process as we go through it. So just to give a quick overview, that is sort of the actual logged cases that we would have had or that we did work through and track, and then just a little preview there of our evaluation survey. So I think going back to the analogy now, where web scraping comes into this is that we are trying to, rather than manually go and shop for all these ingredients and make sure that everything is then sorted out for us and we have everything in place that we need. Here we are kind of scripting a little bot, telling it exactly where in the shop to go, which aisle to go down, what shelf to look on, and what exactly to pick out. And then from all of the data that we got there, we could do some rudimentary data mining, looking at common issues and also looking at how to actually identify those issues. Ultimately then giving it to our taste testers so that they can make sure that everything correct is in place before we actually publish and serve those quality assured marks to the students. So just to give a quick run through of the technical overview of it, with our learning management system, it's just made up of web pages, which are all just comprised of HTML. And the key there really is just that ML in it, which stands for markup language. So any data that you see there would be marked up by a set of tags that indicate some kind of meaning that's usually used to display it. But in this case, just to be able to appreciate sort of how much data there is that's irrelevant for our needs in this case, we created a script that would then go through each one of our course pages, extract the necessary data that we needed, just do the script and selecting specifically what we would like to actually target and pull out. So from there, we kind of get this full picture of the data, and from here we can actually then drill down to try and just identify those errors, but also just draw out some insights on which activities maybe commonly cause it, which faculties there seems to be a more pervasive problem in, and just get more insight there so we know where to do targeted intervention in the future as well. And then lastly, just with our extraction, this made it a lot easier for us to be able to then share this in a sort of shared channel with our learning design team so that they can do targeted intervention by just clicking on those links, going directly to the affected grade item, and making that correction rather than waiting for the academic administrative team to flag that there was an error and place additional burdens on them to then go and manually capture the marks. And just to kind of give an overview of these different phases that we have been going through based off of those incident logs that we did look at. So during 2023 was when we initially started the gradebook setup. They're just focusing on very select type of assessments, still relying quite a bit on the manual capturing there. And then in 2020, the first two quarters of 2024, you can see just that spike that we experienced there. So this is really where we started to incorporate multi-part assessments and leading to that initial intervention that Denise had also demonstrated, where we are actually pulling out the specifications and having that be much clearer. And kind of see how that then towards the start of block one also just alleviated quite a lot of the burden on the team, because we had very clear ideas of what we need to name everything, what weighting to assign to it, and how it should be set up. And then at the start of block two, we just realized that since we have all of that in place and our calculations are being set up, but there were still some issues that were coming in where activities are removed and then affecting all of the marks that are being published for that specific grade item. So just in terms of sort of the research findings from this single intervention, it did show an improvement with reduced error rates and shortened QA cycles, just compared to the manual process we go through, and to then very concretely just show that for an individual learning designer to actually work through each one of these module pages, each one of those grade items and go and identify the issues would have taken them around 15 hours to do, whereas now on a daily basis, we could potentially do that in 25 minutes to extract all of that information and only focus on the ones that actually need the intervention for it. And then we also just did a random check in one of our group chats to count the number of issues we identified over a 2-week span. And so kind of proactively going and identifying those 66 errors in that single case. And then just lastly, before I hand over to Denise to discuss the survey findings, we did also just see that there was a report of increased efficiency and confidence in the accuracy of the published marks following all of these interventions we put in place.
Thanks, Angus. So to speak to our survey findings, we had a survey issued to our learning designers and also to our academic administrators, in which we asked them for feedback on their experience comparing 2023, 2024, and 2025. So most of our respondents provided feedback for their experience in 2025, with academic administration teams being most represented. And the feedback for previous years was relatively lower. But what we saw qualitatively from common challenges that our respondents identified was that marks are still not always pulling through to gradebooks, and manual data entry is still required in those cases, and that confusion is still seen with other stakeholders around assessment setup and reporting. So some of the suggestions that they identified was trying to see how we can automate the process even more and also improve clarity around assessment processes. On the right, you can see a graph there, a bar graph, comparing the years between our AAs and then our learning design teams to the right. We did a Kruskal-Wallis non-parametric test to test if there was a significant decrease in the time of task for quality assurance processes between the two groups across the years. And we saw within the groups, there was definitely a significant drop comparing 2023's time on task and 2025's time on task. And the individual time on task is reported in the table at the bottom right there. Next, I'd like to just talk about some graphical representation of the Likert scale type questions that we asked. So for each year, we asked the LD team, specifically on this slide, to please rate the effort required for each phase of the gradebook setup against the key focus areas of gathering gradebook details, setting up grade items, setting up calculations, getting grade book sign-off, monitoring calculations for changes, actioning change requests, and resolving mark queries. And next, I just want to show you the results that we got on the graphs there. So each of those separate focus areas have their individual graph. And generally, on the x-axis, you can see the Likert scale from left to right. We have very high effort moving down to very low effort. And if we emphasize maybe a trend, just noting that we've got low response rate here, but a trend that we identified was that generally in 2025, our members were indicating that previously high effort was now either moderate or very low even. So we can also then move on to the results that we saw for our academic admin teams. And we also posed similar survey questions to these teams. So against the 3 years, we asked them also on a Likert scale to indicate their effort required for different phases of gradebook readiness, quality assurance of marks, specifically looking at accessing gradebook, finding relevant grade items in gradebook, reporting deviations, and resolving mark queries. And to represent that graphically as well, and then maybe to emphasize some trends there. Again, on the x-axis, you can see the Likert scale, and we're noting the pink line for 2023 in comparison to the blue line for 2025, and there is a general shift to the right on our graph, indicating that in 2025, our academic admins are indicating that there is a drop in the effort required for the tasks that were identified. It's also worth noting that our academic admin teams are generally more comfortable with the tasks that are expected of them, in that majority of their ranges are within moderate to very low effort, irrespective of the year. All right, then on our next slide.
It's my turn again, Denise.
Thanks.
No problem. So I think what everybody would have also been able to very easily tell from that initial graph we showed, just with the amount of incidents that we did record despite the numerous interventions, is that we still need to have a broader scope when it comes to the actual data collection. So here it is all about just identifying the right activities to be included, identifying activity configuration errors, and then also tracking that outstanding grading status that would prevent everything from integrating, regardless of whatever it is that the learning design or academic admin teams do. And so really here it is just about broadening that view, making sure that we are actually going to identifying the correct root cause, despite there being multiple ones, but just making sure that we also then report that in a very clearly very clear and comprehensive way for all the different stakeholders involved. And so here it's also really imperative for us to start improving our monitoring and reporting to additional teams. And I think oftentimes also just to automate the configuration tracking to also alleviate that burden of the teams to actually go back and report, where you can potentially automate that by an API connection to MyLMS. And then also just for broadening the scope and bringing it back to where we can also see integration errors occurring in a targeted fashion for them to go and investigate. And then even in some cases, you can see in the locked column there just where the assessment has not been created, so that the mark, there is no place essentially for the mark to be pushed through to it. So really just to broaden this view of what it is that we're looking for when making these fixes. And then I think over to Denise for the conclusion.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Noting we've got 2 minutes left for our session. Just in conclusion, these results demonstrate how LMS raw course data can be leveraged through automated methods of web scraping and data mining to be a bit more proactive in identifying calculation errors prior to mark integration happening and then being published for our students. We've also observed a reduction in the effort required by our key stakeholders when it comes to gradebook setup and quality assurance. But we're still seeing that the count of calculation errors is not decreasing. And that is an indication that we need a bit more robust approaches, such as training to clarify the process of assessments and the stakeholders involved, and also automating that shopper, that intelligent shopper for us. So yeah, the last statement that I'd like to leave everyone with, as I pull it back to our analogy, is that leveraging data analytics is not just a technical upgrade, but it's a strategic necessity for transforming educational data into meaningful impact for our students, who are at the end going to be the critic of whatever meal we put in front of them. I'd like to invite everyone just to answer the last question that is live on our Slido at this point. And yeah, just thank everybody for their participation. So we had a number of members who answered question 2 on our Slido, and about 50% of us said that we have heard of both web scraping and data mining. And then we had 25% each saying that they've heard of either of the two methods. And the rest of our respondents have not given answers, but all of our respondents have heard of these methods before. Yeah, just to thank you from my side. And Lindeni, if we have any time and we're not going into the next Teams setup, happy to take a question or two.
Thank you so much, Denise and Angus. This was very insightful on the quality assurance measures you now have in place to work with the grade book. I'm just checking the chat. There's no questions, just a few comments from Annie. Well done. And Jamila, awesome job. And Anthea, job well done, emoji. We have 5 minutes, just a 5-minute break before the next presentation by Lerian and Lizelle. Colleagues, if you have a question, please turn on your mic or use the chat to ask Denise and Angus something, or maybe comment. But please remain in the next session. In the same room for the next presentation, unless, of course, you want to navigate to check out the presentations going on in track 1. Bonnie saying, yay, e-learning design team. I think Bonnie was with Eduvos, ne? Still with.
Yes, yeah, so all of our comments so far have been the team rooting. So thank you, it's appreciated.
Thank you very much. I see Lerian and